Welcome, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
I think we're just gonna give everybody a couple of minutes to settle in here. I'm Christian Shah. I'm the founder of SoundFlow, and the other guy is Kitch.
I'm Kitch. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, this is awesome. We're so happy to see this many people joining us. I guess let's just start talking a little bit. We came up with the idea to do this webinar because we saw there's a lot of new users. Um, and these days there's a lot of you, I think, who saw us on Instagram, or like there's a friend who referred you. And yeah, we just figured that let's find a way to make it easier for all you guys to get on board, because we know it's a really technical product, and it can be hard to get over those first steps. So we just want you all to feel welcome on board, and we're here to answer your questions. So this format is a little bit different from a regular Zoom meeting. So for those of you who don't know it, there's some different meeting controls at the bottom of your screen. Um, there's a Q&A section where you can ask questions. I think you can also vote each other's questions up, so we can prioritize those questions. You can also raise your hands virtually. Um, if we ask out questions, or if you want to add something, and you can also use the chat. Kitch joined SoundFlow last year, at the end of last year, I think,
It's about then.
officially at least, and he'll be taking you through the whole setup, all the things. Like we Kitch lined up a lot of things that we can go through. So even if you don't have any questions yet, there's stuff for us to talk about for sure.
Plenty for us to talk about.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So yeah, that's a couple of minutes, and I think, well, we're also recording this webinar, so it's going to be possible for you to view it later, I think, unless we make tons of mistakes. Finally, I want to say, I think we can say that, right, Kitch? I think we talked about making webinars are a weekly thing.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, because there are constantly new users coming in, and it's great to record a webinar and people can watch it later, but I feel like it would be even better if the questions are already always sort of fresh and coming from the actual users that are onboarding. So yeah, I think
Excellent.
once again, just a huge welcome to everybody, and um, just a thank you from the bottom of my heart that you're considering to become a SoundFlow user, or maybe you already are. So yeah, Kitch, do you want to get going, showing some
Yeah, sure. Sounds
stuff?
good. Sounds good. Yeah. So I want to reiterate. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. And no doubt you've found SoundFlow through looking for different ways to help your workflow, and maybe save some time in the process. And you might have delved into SoundFlow a bit and got a bit confused about what's going on. So hopefully this webinar will help you out. So let's have first have a look at the apps setup, the user interface here. So here we've got, actually, I just got to move this out of the way. There we go. So here in our interface, we have tabs up the top here. The start tab is just some general startup information, and different places you can go to navigate through SoundFlow. Then in the profile section here, you can set up your profile information. The editor is where you'll spend most of your time. This is where you create scripts, create macros, design decks and surfaces and things like that. And then in the store here, the store is where you'll find different apps that have been made by other SoundFlow users or by SoundFlow. And you can download these. We've got the premium apps up the top here. And as going down, you can see here's some of Andrew Sheps's free apps here. And so if you are not wanting to do too much work, you can always go to the store and install these apps very easily just by clicking install. And then I'll show you an example. So we click install and then go to the package, and then you've got the pre-made commands already there in the editor page. So going on to the next tab, we've got the keyboard map, which shows you what things are assigned to what keyboard triggers. So that'll help you out in future. If you're having conflicts between different triggers, you'll be able to sort those out. Then we have the SoundFlow user forum, which you can also access from if you go to open up your favorite internet browser, and you can go to forum.soundflow.org, and that'll take you to the forum page where you can ask questions in that how-to area. You can also check out tutorials that are in the tutorial section and ask for support. And there's also an ideas section here where you can request ideas, and they can be put forward for future releases of SoundFlow or future versions of SoundFlow. And one thing that I really should mention is that if you want to get a quick start with SoundFlow, we actually have a playlist on YouTube that you can go to, where we've already created a whole series of videos walking you through things such as setting up keyboard triggers, setting up Stream Deck devices and iPads and iOS and Android devices, and then also going through some more technical stuff on how to write scripts and how to create macros and things like that, and design decks and whatever. So that'll help you out. So yeah, that's the Learning SoundFlow, and actually we could probably put a link. We'll share a link to that, and you can check that out.
Good. Sorry, let me just jump in here to make sure that all of you who are visiting now, please make sure to file your questions in the chat or in the Q&A section, so we can plan ahead a little bit. Kitch can keep talking.
I can keep talking forever.
But we really want this, as Kitch just told you about. We have a lot of pre-recorded videos that are actually really good to learn SoundFlow from, but we want this session to be more sort of on your questions. So please, just shoot them our way. All right. Yeah.
So continuing on, we've got the My Account button here, and if you click that, that'll take you to your account control panel on your web browser, where you can go through and set different things. I won't go to that for the moment, but so if we head back to the editor panel, let's start off by creating a simple macro. So say you wanted to, let me see if I've got Pro Tools open here. So I've got this session here in Pro Tools, and let's see if we say wanted to select the grabber tool here. What we would do is, if we head back to SoundFlow, if we select the package here, actually I haven't gone through this. So the package column here, this is where all the packages are stored in your account. And you'll notice here I've got my packages, which is where the ones that you've created go, and then the installed packages. And these are the packages that you've downloaded from the store. And then you've got all commands, which just shows everything. And then the SoundFlow folder here, this package has a whole bunch of pre-made, different pre-made macros that you can use to get started really quickly. So for those of you who haven't installed SoundFlow yet, the best place to go is if you head over to your web browser and you open up the soundflow.org webpage. Then if you click download, and then you can download from here. And in the Learning SoundFlow playlist, there's a video on how to install SoundFlow that walks you through step by step everything that you need to do. And a couple of tips for those who've already installed SoundFlow. If you're having conflicts with the default triggers that come with SoundFlow, a great way to deal with that is either using the keyboard map here, or if you just want to have them disabled, or you want them there but disabled, you can choose the profile menu here. And you've got these three options. You've got no default triggers, which completely removes it. So you've got a clean slate to start with. Or you can use the default triggers. So that's default triggers that come with SoundFlow that are, Christian has actually spent a lot of time setting them up. So it worked for his workflow and for many other people's workflows. But if you want to have them and then choose what you want to turn on and off, you can choose use default SoundFlow triggers, but disabled. This one here. So
You
this
can
is the one that
always,
I have set up.
yeah, sorry, just to add on. So you can always individually turn them on and off, but the disabled option just defaults them to all be disabled, so you turn them on, and the other option, they default to being on, so you have to individually turn them off. So they're just sort of sibling options. I just want to jump in with a question from
Sure.
Frank Marone.
Mhm.
Frank says, I want to start fresh and I want to remove my packages and keyboard macros, especially the keyboard macros. What is the best way to do that? So to begin answering that, I think while Kitch will navigate to the editor page, there's let me try to emphasize what we mean by macros and what we mean by triggers. So a macro is what Kitch has here, for example, open instrument deck, or yeah, you can create a new macro. So a macro is something that runs, that you've like, it contains actions. So you can say a macro is a collection of actions that can be executed. For example, the click UI element action would be one. And then in terms of why a macro or when a macro is run, we call that a trigger. So if you click on the new trigger button here, you can then assign different triggers that indicate to SoundFlow when should we run this macro for you. So I think, Frank, what you mean is you want to disable all the keyboard triggers for any of your macros. And as Kitch just talked about, Kitch, if you navigate down to to one of the blue commands in, let's say, automation editing, or yeah, so these are all the blue commands are sort of the built-in commands in SoundFlow. As we talked about, the option B trigger here, as we see, that's a default trigger that is disabled by default here. So Frank, if what you meant was that you wanted to remove all these keyboard triggers, the first step would be to figure out, do you want to remove all the default triggers? Then to do that, that would be to go to the profile menu and choose that third option or the first option, depending on if you want access to them or not. Try to click no default, just so everybody can see. So you see, like, now we just lost that default trigger. It just got removed, but you can always get them back again. If you use them all by default, you can see that was disabled individually, but now you got all these default triggers back. So the way to get all of those lost, you could change your setting in the profile. And then if you have assigned any keyboard triggers to any of your own packages or to any of the installed packages, you would have to go in and delete those triggers yourself. So Kitch, do you have any shortcuts assigned currently?
Let me see. I think in here, maybe not. But if I did have one, I could quickly.
Yeah. But then, why don't you show adding a keyboard trigger here?
Yeah. Well, how about even better? Let's do the click UI element, and then we'll add a trigger to that, and then that'll sum up the process.
All right. So before we do that, though, I just want to circle back to Frank's question. So we'll show in a bit how you add a keyboard trigger and how you remove it again. But
Perfect.
if you do have a feeling that you want to start completely fresh with an account, you can, of course, always talk to us in the website chat. If you want like everything deleted, that's always possible. Any sort of account level help you need, we're there in the chat. If you have questions for scripts and macros, it's often better to ask those in the forum, because then we can share our answers with the whole community. And then there's the last option that I think I may prefer. So if you create a new profile, you can use that to, so what a profile is in SoundFlow is a collection of triggers. So um, when you create a macro or a surface or a deck, they'll stay in your account. They're like global for your whole SoundFlow account. But the profiles are sort of sets of triggers. And so profiles are really designed for if you are a sound editor and sometimes you also mix. Maybe you have, maybe you want to reuse some of the same shortcuts for two different things depending on your workload. So using profiles is a way to change all your triggers but keep your macros.
Another great reason to use profiles is if you're moving from studio to studio, and because SoundFlow is a cloud-based subscription, that you're able to take all of your macros and scripts and decks with you, and then you can open on different systems where you want to have different configurations of triggers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And to create a new profile, you would go into the either right here, yeah, or you would go into the profile page. Either works, yeah.
New profile there.
And then it has some steps where it asks you, do you want to use SoundFlow's default triggers or not? And you give it a name, and then you have a completely fresh thing. And if you want to delete installed packages, which I think was the last question in the editor, I think some people, this is actually good to talk about. People think there's no delete button in SoundFlow, but you just have to select the stuff you want to delete, and then you click your delete key on the keyboard. Or in the case of an install package, you can click the uninstall button, as Kitch is showing here. So
just here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to? There's another question, but let's have you talk about how to create a macro and add a trigger.
Yeah, let's do that. There's one other thing that I wanted to cover before we do that, and that is sometimes with SoundFlow, SoundFlow is opened differently to normal apps. So if we have this window closed, and if we go down here and click on SoundFlow, it's not going to actually open it. The way that we open SoundFlow is from the icon in the top right corner here. And then we go to the Open SoundFlow button here, click that, and then that will open the interface. That's just something to know. It's always accessible right there, so you don't have to open your menu up, and it's ready to go. Okay, so let's create a trigger. That's a macro. So we're going to create a macro to click the grabber tool here, the grabber time tool here in Pro Tools. So what I'm going to do, the first thing I need to do is I need to select the package where I want to put the macro. So for now, I'm just going to put it in the default package. Then to create a new macro, I'm going to click the plus button up here and then click macro to create a new macro. And let's call it grabber tool. So now if you'll notice here on the right-hand side, this is the macro editor, and you'll know that by the add action button here. And so if I click add action, this will bring up a sortable list of all the different macro actions that we have. So you'll notice here, you've got the all results, and then we've got apps and a whole series of different folders down here. So for Pro Tools specific actions, you can click on the Pro Tools folder here, and then that'll show you different things you can use here. But if you just want to do a general click UI element thing, you can just start typing, click. Oops, hang on, something went wrong. That was me, sorry. So if I right click UI and then select click UI element, and then it comes up with the action right here. So the action has an on-off switch here, and then it's got the property here. It's got the action name here. Then we've got the advanced properties here and error handling information, which is more advanced stuff. Then we've got this button, which we'll talk about later, which is converting to JavaScript. And then we've got the delete button here. So what we want to do is we want to use we want to set the property, the UI element property, by clicking the pick button and then Command Tab over to Pro Tools. And then if I select, you'll notice as I'm rolling over stuff, they are highlighted in red color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the grabber tool right here. And now if I head back to SoundFlow, you'll notice that it's actually grabbed the path to that button. So it's in the application Pro Tools. It's in the main window of Pro Tools. It's in the cursor tool cluster, which is this area here. And then it's grabbing the first button that is named Grabber Tool Time. And so we know that that's working. So what we want to do now is we want to create a trigger so that when we're in Pro Tools, we can get this macro action to work. So essentially, it's if we're going to assign a keyboard shortcut, what we do is we click the plus button for new trigger here, and we're given options. We've got a whole different series of triggers that we can use. But for now, we'll just use the keyboard trigger. And so we then get this list here. So we've got the type of trigger, which we can reassign at any time. And then when these apps are focused, we can then click this and we can choose or start typing. So if I type in Pro Tools and press return, that will select Pro Tools. So this keyboard trigger that we're going to assign is only going to work when Pro Tools is the focused app, which is what we want. So if I click record and then use the keyboard shortcut Control X, you can assign it to anything that you want. So now that trigger is set up and we just click anywhere to get that to disappear. So now if I head back over to Pro Tools and I click Control X, you'll notice, just watch here carefully, Control X, it switches over to the grabber tool. So that's a very simple application of using a macro and using a macro action. And the great thing about SoundFlow is you don't just get the ability to add one action, you can add a whole series of different actions to create a workflow exactly the way that you want it. Does that make any sense? Are there any questions from the...
Yeah, sorry, Kitch, while you were talking, Terry Chrome has asked 2 questions. So one of them was if we could walk through how to programming shortcuts or scripts for Pro Tools real-time plugins. I think so that could be inserts or Audio Suite. I think they're sort of both interesting, actually. And in particular, how to select presets. And so I was actually just debugging some stuff here because I found a bug in one of my own packages that didn't work with the latest version of Pro Tools. So of course that might be Terry, while you have oh, I'm sorry, Sean. I'm seeing that you you feel like this is too complex to follow. If there's anything specific that you want us to cover, please feel free to reach out. So
Yeah,
to
we'd
go
be
back
happy
to
to help
Terry's question, I think there are 2 ways we can look at that. There's sort of how can you program your own macro to deal with that preset menu. I think that is what will empower you the most. The next thing would be to talk about packages on the store that already have that functionality.
Yeah,
Should I share my screen and just show how I would
absolutely.
approach that? We didn't test this, but let's see if it works. So I hope you can all see this.
Yep.
So if we start in the reverse order, I have at least a package called Pro Tools Audio Suite, Audio Suite being in one word. It's on the store, so you can just search for Audio Suite and it's here. And I'm pretty sure I launched this before the last version of Pro Tools. So actually, if you fill out that preset menu path, it looks like there was an error in that. We couldn't find that preset button up here to select the proper one. I'm pretty sure I just fixed it in that. So for what it's worth, I'll be uploading a new version of this package when we're done here, and hopefully that's enough for you. And you can use that package, or You can even go in and see the code. It's not very complex code-wise, but of course, if you don't like using code, you can just install that package. And uh, this is an example of a package that uses templates and presets. So we have a full webinar that covers that. But essentially, this one script is a template, and then you can create your own presets for it. So it will essentially open a specific audio suite plugin. If you select a preset menu path, it'll select the preset for you. You can choose the input and output mode. It'll then render your audio selection and then close the plugin again. So you can sort of get, if you then add like a shortcut, or you add this to a Stream Deck, you can get like a one button to do cool stuff. And yeah, so but obviously, if you just install the new version of this package after we're done here, that should work. But instead of just doing that, let me create a new package here and call it tests. Where did that go? Here. And let me show you how to create a macro that would press that button here and select a preset directly. I think we'll just set it to maybe user default or something because these are really long to type. So the way to go about adding UI element, and again, we have 2 videos that cover this in great detail. So I'm going to go over this a little bit quickly. Let's just call it select preset, and we're going to be using the open and select item in pop-up menu. This action takes care of both clicking on the pop-up button and selecting the item inside of the pop-up menu. So you'll see there's a couple of other actions that have stuff to do with pop-up menus, but they're for different purposes. So as a general rule, this is the action you want to use. So just like the click UI element action, you use pick, and then, oh, I can see it doesn't like zoom here. Let's see if we can make it work while screen sharing. That's always interesting. Oh, I think it actually showed it. I think we're just, yeah. So you can see, I think, I don't know how it looked on your side, but it was showing the highlights in a wrong place on the screen. So, but it did, I just clicked with my with my mouse on that button that I want selected. And you can then sort of double check here that the UI element path is correct. It goes for the Pro Tools app. It finds the first audio suite window that's focused, and then the first pop-up button with the title preset. So that's what we want to click. And then if we want to decide the menu path inside of that, we call it a menu path because you can have several layers deep of folders inside these. And so if I wanted to go to rhythmic gated broken, I would have to first type this whole text, then enter, and then this whole text. So to save myself from having to do that, I'm just going to type in user default here. And it's very important that you type it exactly as it's shown in this menu, otherwise it won't work. Another thing that might be worth mentioning when you're creating your own macros like this, when you are testing them, I find it super useful to always use the same keyboard trigger for testing. So I always use Control X, and I know it's a temporary shortcut that I can just use while testing. You'll see here that this one has a conflict because I used that somewhere else. And so it alerts me that, Control X isn't used, and I can just click here to remove that other trigger. So now I have Control X assigned to my test script here. And another important thing is that in a lot of these actions, you want to make sure that Pro Tools is focused before you start. And the best macro action to use for that is called Activate App's Main Window. So I'm just going to add that here, drag it on top, and then select Pro Tools 2020-12. It doesn't really matter which version you select. If you have more installed, it should work regardless. So I still want to sort of manually switch over here, but the focus thing becomes important if you have decks or surfaces on screen. So when you click those, you want to make sure that Pro Tools gets focused before. So when I click now, it should have selected user default, but it didn't. Let's try again. I think it does try to select it. Oh yeah, okay. So this is the default one. Let's select something else. Yay.
There we go.
All right. So I think, Terry, that sort of explains a little bit how you can create these macros yourself. Now, if you wanted to turn this into a script, you can just click Convert to Script and see it here. And then from then on, you could convert it into a template and actually come up, I think, pretty easily with the same thing I set up here. So,
Christian, before we move on, if you go back to that macro, something that that I absolutely loved when I first started using SoundFlow is if you go to the trigger, and you'll notice that that at the moment we're using a keyboard shortcut, which is Control X. But say you wanted to use a keyboard trigger, like just a letter on your keyboard.
yep.
With other software that does keyboard shortcuts, you can have issues when using Pro Tools, where when it comes to entering text, every time you type that key, it will trigger whatever's assigned to that, and then all of a sudden your computer's doing crazy things. So SoundFlow has this thing where you can ignore the trigger when it'll work out whether you're actually entering text, and it will say it'll turn the trigger off for that moment, which I think is a great feature.
And it works like 80 to 90% of the time.
80 to 90% of the time.
Actually, now I just and this only works if you've selected Pro Tools for the trigger, so that this trigger only works in Pro Tools, because obviously otherwise essentially the ignore when typing text feature is only available to Pro Tools specific shortcuts that you make.
Yes.
So now I assigned F to this, and if I go back here and select something else, and now I just press F on my keyboard, that will work. But if, let's say, I'm in the
rename
open
track.
Oh, actually, let's do track rename. Now I can still type F, and it will understand that I'm typing text. It should try to do something in the audio suite window. However, this is limited in that if you're typing track comments, we can't know at this point that you're trying to type text. It's just a technical limitation. So now you'll get the error. And so the way to get around this, if you want to use single letter non-modifier key shortcuts in Pro Tools with SoundFlow commands, you'll have to temporarily bypass SoundFlow when entering in the comment section. The way to do that is to use the default shortcut. If you're using those, it would be Control Escape, and you can see I can toggle SoundFlow's bypass state on and off. So now it's bypassed, and I can type F as much as I want. I can go out here, Control Escape to unbypass again. If you don't have that trigger assigned, you can always go up here and then just toggle bypass like that. And finally, if you want to change that shortcut, you can go all the way down here to SoundFlow System, and then find SoundFlow Bypass, and it's just a keyboard trigger like anything else. So you can just add whatever shortcut you want to bypass here. All right.
Great.
Kitch, do you want to? So Terry had a different question, but I think it could also be worth it to jump back for a bit to the regular content, as I'll be preparing an answer to Terry's question.
Great. Okay. I'll share my screen again. So.
Okay. Actually, there's a lot of good questions in the chat that I couldn't see while sharing. So.
Oh, great. Okay.
But yeah, go ahead, and I'll try to ask questions.
Excellent. Okay. So let me see. So as far as useful actions to use, there's a handful of actions that I always seem to be using over and over again. You can do things like click UI element. And when click UI element doesn't work, you can use mouse click relative to UI element, which allows you to click on things that aren't that SoundFlow can't see the user element. Let me show you an example. Close this. So I click the add action here, and then right in mouse click relative to UI element, and press return. and that brings up this this macro action here. So for instance, if I head over to Pro Tools and let me open up a plugin here. Let me see. So say I wanted to click on an element here, say one of these buttons here. If I wanted to do that, sometimes when we're using SoundFlow, if I click the pick button here, head back over to Pro Tools, you'll notice that I actually can't pick the elements. And that's because the user interface of plugins has not been shown to the system. So therefore we can't access them because we can't get under the hood. So to click these buttons, what we need to do is we need to select the whole window here like that. And then if we head back to SoundFlow, as you can see here, it's selected the whole plugin window. So then what we need to do is we need to know the XY coordinates of where the button is that we want to click. So if we head back over to Pro Tools, and if I use Command Shift and the number 4, that's going to bring up the screenshot option. I don't know if you can see it here, but it turns it into a crosshair. And if we go to the top right corner of that and say we wanted to click the high pass filter here, so we'd find the X and Y coordinates. So the X coordinate is going to be 29, and then the Y coordinate is going to be 200. So 29 and 200. So press escape to clear that. And then if we head back over to SoundFlow, and we can type in 29 and 200. And then because we've got the keyboard shortcut already assigned, if we head back over to this, and if I run Control X, you'll notice it switches it. So that's the way to get around it if you can't click a UI element. Christian,
Right.
did you want to continue on with that question?
Yeah, there's a lot of great questions. So thank you everybody for and a couple of comments. I think I'll take some of them in reverse order just as I remember them. Heiko Meile talks about as a beginner coming into the store and downloading stuff, some of those packages might not work with the version of Pro Tools that you're running. I was just showing an example of one of my own packages that had stopped working for some reason. And I think Heiko's suggestion was that we make a better labeling system so that people will know which versions of Pro Tools it's tested with. And I completely agree. Just want to say that it's a good suggestion. We've heard it before, and I generally don't talk about future releases, but let's just say that we're working on it. We can't make promises, but yeah, it's obviously hugely important. If you do have problems with packages, I will just show my screen here to show you how to deal with that. So the best way to do it is to open up the forum. Actually, that's wrong. Strike that. You'll find the package that you do have a problem with or a question about. Let's say Kitsch's command template collection here. So the best...
There's no problems with that one.
Obviously. Well, so for example, I haven't updated to the latest version. That's always a good idea to check. If you want to get an overview of all the potential updates, you just click here, show available updates. And so it's voluntary when you do want to make an update, because as you know, like maybe an update can break something. So it's always sort of a voluntary thing. But if you do have a problem with the package, you can click here to the package forum, and it loads a little bit slowly, but then you have this subsection of the forum that is specifically designed for questions or bug reports for that specific package. Yeah, so that's the place to get help for that. Henrik Skam talked about if we can talk a little bit about keyboard conflicts. So I think there are two levels of keyboard conflicts you could talk about. One is obviously if you end up having multiple scripts in SoundFlow that share the same triggers. So that's sort of a conflict. The way that SoundFlow handles that is like, it just doesn't like it. It'll light up in red here if you do it. And as I showed you before, there's an option to remove those conflicts. What we don't really show you is if it has a conflict with something that was built into Pro Tools or some other app. Um, the hierarchy is that first macOS receives the keystroke, and then if you've anything set up in your system preferences under keyboard in shortcuts here, these have the first priority. So if you've set something up here, for example, I'm sure you know like mission control is using like control up and down arrows, which is really annoying in Pro Tools because you want to use that for something else. But it also means if there's something set up here, SoundFlow won't receive those keystrokes. So whatever you've set up here is the first thing that macOS looks at. If nothing is set there, then it looks at all the global keyboard software that you're using. So if you're using SoundFlow alone, we would get that message. But if you're using other keyboard software, there's a high likelihood that they could sometimes end up getting the message, and other times SoundFlow would get it. So at those times, it's really important that you somehow keep track of that manually. Of course, we advise that you try to keep your setup as simple as possible, so only one app is controlling your keyboard. Um, and then if SoundFlow doesn't have a trigger for that key, it will then be passed on to the third layer, which is the individual application you're in. So that's why SoundFlow can override what's going on in Pro Tools. And if you don't want it to override, you just remove the trigger in SoundFlow like that. So if you end up having a conflict in SoundFlow, it'll look like this. So let's just say I'm using Control X here. That's all great. Now I want to add that same trigger to somewhere else. I think you saw this a little bit before. So here's how it will show in each of the commands. They'll light up in red. The trigger will be shown as red here. And in either of them, you can either just delete this or disable it, as I just did now. And now it's no longer a conflict because one of them is disabled. You can delete it altogether where you are, or you can use this link to delete one of the conflicts. So this is just a speedy way of handling conflicts. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say about that. We're getting some more great questions. I think we should go to Terry's a little bit older question about if we could run through programming a script to call up a different programmed surface. Actually, kids, do you want to? You have an iPad there.
Yes, I do.
Do you want to prepare that while I answer a different question?
Sure.
Because I don't have my iPad set up here. So, J.R. Chapel says, is there a way to copy and paste a command? I have a bunch of items that I want to return to my Pro Tools deck when finished. Can I paste the deck, or do I need to find it each time? I'm not sure I understand this question actually. So let me just see if I can find you, JR, and give you. So yeah, I just loaded you up here. So I'd be happy to take your question. I think I need to understand a little bit more what you're trying to do.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, welcome.
All right, so I have a whole bunch of commands that I've pre-made, and now that I've done that, when I've activated them, I want it to then return to my main Pro Tools deck. See what I mean?
Right. So you're having a separate deck for those things.
Right. So I have a Pro Tools, my main deck, and then I'm starting to make other decks within that. So I want to always go back to that Pro Tools deck when I'm in Pro Tools, obviously. The thing is, I want to be able to take that Pro Tools deck and now paste it into all of these different commands I've made all over the place. And so I'm finding I have to, and I type in, I named it Pro Tools. So now I have to type in Pro Tools and then all these commands, and I have to go find it within the list. So it's a little complicated to get to it.
Gotcha. Thank you. So let me just try to answer that here on my screen. There's a couple of techniques, and bear in mind, Kitch, feel free to jump in if you feel like I'm misunderstanding things. I think sometimes it can be harder to explain stuff you program yourself, obviously.
Yeah.
So it sounds to me, JR, as if you're actually mapping out decks the way we prefer or recommend. You can actually have a look here in my own personal decks package. So yeah, sorry, there's so many things I want to talk about. But you can see here I have a Cubase deck, Bruce deck, Ableton obviously my decks are always the ugliest ones because I don't spend enough time making them cool. So this is my master deck that I have always open. Another cool suggestion, actually, if you have more than one Stream Deck, I would really recommend having one of them be static because it allows you to always sort of have direct access to something. That's the way I use them. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do triggering of decks, meaning when should they be shown. So what I have here for my master deck is I'm using a Stream Deck connection trigger. They're named somewhat weirdly, but it essentially just means when any Stream Deck becomes connected, for example, when you start up your computer, or if you've taken out a Stream Deck physically from the USB hub and you attach it again, when SoundFlow then recognizes it, it's going to run the deck command. And by running it, it just means show it on the device that you've selected for it. So this is the best way to have sort of something default that just boots up with your system. Then what we typically use are application triggers so that when a specific application or any of multiple applications become activated or focused, then that deck will show up. I can actually show you this if I change a couple of things here in my account. So I have also Pro Tools main deck. Now, if I choose the device to be this machine and I click Show Deck, you can see it opens up on my Mac. So this is one of the new features in 4.2, that decks can be shown on Macs and on iOS and Android devices. But since I have when activate Pro Tools, beautiful language here, this trigger means this will automatically be shown when I focus Pro Tools. So let me just switch to Pro Tools, and that deck now opened on this machine. If I'd set it to one of my Stream Decks, it would have opened there. So these are I just wanted to make sure everybody knows these are the basic trigger types. To add an application trigger, you just click here, choose application trigger, and you choose which app you're talking about, and then typically you want to use the activate event. So that's the general thing. Then we have what we call folders inside of decks that you can use to navigate. So you can turn any button into a folder just by clicking here. And then when you're inside that folder, you can sort of give that more content. We only recommend using subfolders for simple hierarchies. You don't want to end up with a huge deck with like 10 levels of nesting because it becomes really difficult to manage. Instead, so now I'm just deleting this folder by selecting it and hitting the delete key and pressing OK. What we instead recommend is that you create links between decks so that, and by doing that, you can have any deck, link to any other deck, and you can even control where to show it. So let's say I have my Pro Tools track utilities deck here that I think I copied from Chris Shaw, actually. So this one has a back button, and you can see I actually just assigned that to the Pro Tools main deck button. But there's an even better way to do it now with 4.2. So let me just show you. I'm going to delete that here. We're just going to keep the text of the back button. But essentially what I wanted to do is to switch to this other deck. So the two options are either you just click Add Existing Command, then you search for it, hit Enter, and that's it. I think, JR, you might have been talking about, is it possible to copy paste such a link? And in fact, yes, you can copy paste buttons here. So you just select the button, press Command C, move somewhere else, and press Command V. So it is possible to sort of recreate such links. What I would recommend, though, instead of linking directly to the other deck, is to instead create a macro. And Kitch actually just made a really good video for this. Let me just show it. So now I'm just going to call it Pro Tools main deck open and create that as a macro. I named it like this so that it would show up in the same order. And so what I'll show you here is just a very brief overview of the open deck action that you can add into any macro. So this could be part of a much longer script or macro. Essentially, it allows you to select the deck, in this case, Pro Tools main deck. and I can get to choose the device. So this device could be different from what you had selected in here. So let's say by default, I want this to be shown on my Stream Deck left, but my macro action wants to actually show it on my Mac. So now if I run that macro, it'll show this up. And so now that I have a macro that can do that, in my deck button here, I can choose to link that button to that macro. And this is yet another way sort of re-implementing the same functionality across many decks. So if there's a specific thing you want to happen from many different decks, it's a really good idea to put that in a macro, because you get a single point of entry, or like there's a single point where you can change the behavior for all of them. So let's just show this deck on this machine here. And now if I click back, it should open up the other deck on this machine. So remember, you can also use the open deck here. You can, and actually this is what I asked Kitch to show you for Surfaces, but it's almost the same thing. If you've got an iPad attached, this would, or an iPhone, and it's in the right mode, this would also show up with all your mobile devices, so that you can control which device do I want to show this deck on.
I could actually show them how that works if...
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
And I'll get up to date with all the questions.
Okay, great. So here, here's my iPad. It's actually my wife's iPad. I just borrowed it for the day. And I've got SoundFlow, the SoundFlow app installed on this, and you can get that from the Apple Store. Just look up SoundFlow on the Apple Store. If I click on the button here, it will open this up. And as you can see here, I've got all my surfaces and decks laid out. So if I wanted to manually open up one of the decks, like say this deck here, which is the Pro Tools deck, if I clicked on that, so I've got to click on my iPad. Okay, so that will bring up the deck on the iPad. So if I head back by clicking, actually, let me go back to that. If I click the blue button here at the top, the blue SoundFlow icon, that'll take me back to the main page. So if you're using decks or surfaces on your iPad and you want to be able to display them quickly, you need to be in this main page of the SoundFlow app for that to work correctly. So now what I'm going to do is say I wanted to create a macro that is going to show this programmatically on the iPad. The way that I do that is I'd come up here and I'd click the plus button, then I'd create macro, and let's call it show Pro Tools deck. And now if I click the add button here, and I'm going to go show deck, and we've got open deck or show on device. And if we click on that, then with the SoundFlow app open on the iPad, if we select the deck here by writing Pro Tools deck, and then for the device, I select Kitch's iPad Air. I renamed it just for the tutorial. And the open mode, I'm going to leave that as open or create. If you wanted to open multiple instances of the like say you wanted to open like multiple versions of it on your screen, you could use the create new, but most of the time just leave that as open or create. So now if I run this, let me just show my screen here. And actually, let me just resize this. Bear with me a second. So if I run this now, you'll notice.
Hopefully, maybe.
It could be a Zoom issue.
Yeah.
Pro Tools deck. Let me just check that it's working on my machine. That's working. And
feel like it's good for you guys to also see what the troubleshooting steps are if something's not working. So one thing that could have happened here was that the iPad lost connection somehow to the server.
Yes,
So you
true.
could,
So
of course, quit the app on the device.
quit. How do I
Oh,
quit on this one?
Dennis, we are using QuickTime Player for that. If you open the QuickTime Player, I think not the Pro,
Yeah.
but just the new version, and you go
And then
new
go
movie recording.
new movie record.
Yeah, it'll work.
It's handy. Okay, so let me just try and open this again.
And Frank, we'll get to your
Okay.
question in a sec for the XY.
Select. So now, there we go. It worked. Yes. So it's obviously, yeah, my iPad lost connection. So yeah, that means you can show that. And so if you wanted to change this to your machine, then you could run that, and you can also have that on your machine. And if I wanted to have it on my Stream Deck as well, I click that, and then it would show up on my Stream Deck. So there are all many different options. And if you have a question about a specific way that you want to set things up, please ask a question in the how-to section of the SoundFlow user forum. That way we have a really active community of users that like helping people out. So if you want to set things up, we love it when people have things set up nicely. It makes us very happy. So do that for sure.
Yeah,
I think that's good.
and I mean, what I really feel like is mind blowing with these decks, right? It's just you go over it so quickly, but I feel like it's crazy that you decide like the surfaces can obviously do a lot more. You can have faders, you can have button speed exactly like a specific size you want and stuff like that. But the nice thing about decks is they're so easy to set up, and they work on the Stream Decks too, and that means there's just so much content of that out in the store. That you just need an iPad, any touch thing. You can use your iPhone and it works.
So check this out. One of the cool features. Let's just call this extreme. So if I was to create a new deck here, you'll notice that I've got just the standard deck size here for the Stream Deck, and then you can go to the larger XL deck. But the great thing with being able to display decks on your devices is you can actually set a custom size for your deck, and you can make it 30 rows by 30 columns, and each of these could display. So if you had a big touch screen, you could create a massive matrix of all the buttons that you want. And have everything right at your fingertips.
All right, let's take a couple of more questions. Please keep them coming. If you have any, as we talked about, we're probably going to try to make this a weekly recurring event. So if you come up with a question right after we stop, that's fine too. You'll get another chance. But let's take two questions from Frank Marone. Sorry, Frank. The first one is, in the store, can you categorize which packages are designed for the iPad? Unfortunately, we can't that yet, but this is one of the, I mean, I guess I can say it, like we're working on making the next release only about improving the store, because we realized that there's so much content now that it's just impossible to know what works, what doesn't. So all of your questions for this is, I just want to let you know, this is the first time we make that public. But I mean, and so, take it with a grain of salt. Sometimes roadmaps change, but at least to let you know, we're working on improving the store experience by a lot for the next release. So the short answer is now, no, you can't do that now. But you're always welcome to, also in the Facebook group, just ask out a question. For example, what are some cool packages you guys know? I'm sure you're going to get a lot of great answers, because there are always going to be somebody before you who took the time to go through everything, and it's probably not me, so I can I can only answer some of it. Kitch, there was another question from Frank around the mouse click relative to UI element
Yes.
action. Can you go back to that?
Let me see, which was that in?
Oh yeah, so this shows that you should always rename your stuff according.
Yes. Yeah, rename it. Okay.
Yeah.
So, you can rename it just by double clicking on it, and
Exactly. Yeah. That's also good knowledge.
Okay, great.
Yeah, apologies for all the less than intuitive design choices we made at certain times. I made. We also working on an update to the UI at one point. So Frank's question was, will this trigger type or this action type, will that only work if the plugin shows up at a specific position on the screen? And the answer is no, it will work regardless of where the plugin is. So just keep, can you stay there for a second?
Yes, sir. Yep.
So you'll notice that there's the UI element in the first property, which just defines what is the UI element that we want to click relative to. So that defines it's that full plugin window. The next line you'll see it says relative position. So this is the X and the Y distance from, in this case, the top left corner of the window. And I'm saying that because in the third line, you can choose what it should be relative to. So in this case, normally, or just in most cases, you want to, obviously we need to find somewhere you want to click. And all we know is the size of the window and the position. So by going relative to the top left corner, you can reach any part of the UI that doesn't resize with it. So you could also have cases, could try to go back to the plugin now in Pro Tools. So imagine that this was a resizable UI. Most plugins aren't, but if it was, then maybe you want to press something in the bottom right corner, and it's always going to be in the bottom right corner, but the size of the window may change. Then you would use the coordinates relative to the bottom right corner, and you could choose that by going bottom right. And then your X and Y values would have to be negative because you always count X to the right and Y downwards. So by going top left as a default, it just makes it a little bit clearer.
Yeah,
so this actually is super cool. It actually means you can automate a lot of things that you thought you couldn't. So SoundFlow just understands where is the element on screen that we know, which is the full window, and then within that, how do you want to solve the coordinates?
And not only that, with the mouse click relative to UI element, you also have some advanced options. If I click this, where it allows you to, I think the right click was already there, but the click type, you've got down, up, all those different ones. And then you've got options to hold modifier keys while you're actually clicking. So for instance, if you wanted to reset a parameter by holding, I think it's option click or command click.
Probably, yeah.
Sometimes it's option, sometimes it's command. So whichever one you want to use, you can just switch these options, and you can also choose how many times you want to click. So the advanced property here is always great to look at if you're if you're thinking maybe there's something you want extra, then you can choose from the advanced properties. Yeah.
So Kitch, if this macro now wasn't working, what do you do?
Panic and run for the hills.
No, you just shout. You just call my, personal phone number, and you just shout into the phone.
That's right. That's right. I connect with you on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, everything. I work out where you live, everything. No. The best thing to do is just troubleshoot
the script
it.
help workflow.
The script help workflow.
Yeah.
So if let me see.
Sorry to put you on the spot. So the first, let me talk you through it. So the script help workflow is the best way for us to get information about what is not working, because one of the hardest things for us to help with is when stuff doesn't work, but we don't know what you mean by it doesn't working. So the first thing to do is to convert your macro into a script if it was a macro. The reason for that is scripts are easier to format on the form, and they're easier to troubleshoot. So yeah,
cool.
So,
I can take it. I can take it from here.
Oh yeah, sure. Okay.
So I just completely zoned out on what I had to do. So this button here, in the you'll notice that the script has been the macro has been converted into its script equivalent, which is a great way of learning how to write scripts. and get your feet wet with that. But you'll notice over the top here of the editor, we've got the help button. If we click that, that's going to open up a panel here where you can ask to get help with your script. So in here, you can write in a clear summary of the problem that you're having. And then you can write in the desired workflow. Basically, imagine the manual steps you take and just list them out in order of the manual steps you take to achieve the workflow that you want. And then write a question, as much detail as possible. And here, including my logs, like if your script isn't working, or if you're trying to work out what's actually going wrong, this will actually upload the log, so people who know how to debug in a more intense way can go in and check out what's actually going on. And then when you click Ask Question, then that's going to take you to it's going to post a question in the How To section here of the SoundFlow user forum, where other SoundFlow users can help you out. And and that's great. And you can always get to help stuff by clicking the question mark in the top right corner here. Mm-hmm. And that gives you a list of different help categories to go through. So, if you wanted to get started, you wanted to work on triggers, you can watch a video here on that, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, awesome. And obviously with help that you need, that you want to keep more private, that you want to talk to Christian or I about specifically, regarding licensing issues and stuff like that, you could use the chat with support button here, which will bring this up where you'll be able to ask questions.
Exactly. Yeah. So we actually have a full article that Kitch wrote and a video showing all the sort of 5 different ways to get help. And I just want to apologize that there even are 5 different ways to do it. But of course, it's because we grow over time and we've come up with new, better ideas. There's also a help issue workflow, and we'll always try to guide you to the best channel. And just so you know that the reason why we're doing all those things is to keep the company scalable and to make sure that we spend most of our time building the product, and sort of just so when we push you to do stuff on the forum, it's because it allows us to help many more people at the same time. So and it's incredible, the forum. I think there are over 30,000 posts now by users, and only about a third of them are mine.
Yeah, it was amazing the first time I got on the forum. I was just wondering how I was going to achieve a workflow to, because there were a lot of repetitive tasks that I had. At the time, I was doing a lot of audiobook editing, and I asked a question on how to do something, and within 5 minutes, I got a pre-written script by another user that helped me out. And actually, Christian helped me out back then, but he's doing more behind the scenes stuff now to improve the product. And and then a few weeks in, I even had I even saw Andrew Sheps asking a question. So I helped him out, and then he in turn helped others out, and it's become this really great community of people just helping each other out. It's fantastic. We love that positive energy.
Yeah. There's a question from Andreas that I'll just take. And Kitch, perhaps you want to, so I don't know how much time people have, and I completely understand. I think we talked about this perhaps being an hour, but we're happy to stay on. Yeah. And it's just, now we're here. So let's get some questions answered. I thought you might want to prepare just showing how to create a surface and
great.
Setting up, like adding a button and a fader, and also the stuff about how to make sure to tick on the platform buttons because they're important. So while Kitch prepares that, let me just share my screen here and answer Andreas's question. So Andreas asks, is there a way to only click a checkbox if it is already checked or unchecked, making sure a setting is off or on? Yes. It is. So I just loaded up this actually, and I forgot to rename my macro here. So you can use the set checkbox value action, And for a lot of the things in SoundFlow where something can be on or off, we use what we call a target value. So it's by default set to toggle, meaning it'll click the thing no matter what. But you can also set it to enable, which would mean only if it's unchecked will we click the button so that the checkbox becomes checked. If you click disable, it would uncheck it no matter which state it was in before. So this is the way to do that. Depending on what you're trying to set, I think I just want to mention another package here that is really popular. It's called the Pro Tools Preference Manager. So it looks like this. It just has 4 presets for storing and recalling all of your preferences in Pro Tools. Oh, there's even a video. So what it will do, those scripts in that package, it will go through all of your menus here and understand or read very quickly which ones are checked, which aren't. And so it'll do that for, I think, some of the menus here, the most important ones. I think options and view are the ones that do have checkboxes. And then it'll also go through your preferences in all of these windows. So it works the best if you're recalling and storing from and to the same version of Pro Tools. But yeah, so that's another way to, that sort of is a little bit like that. There may also be things in Pro Tools that are not checkboxes though. So for example, values of buttons like this, for example, is this selected or not? I think that is reflected differently from a checkbox. But Kitsch has actually made a really good video about that. So it's in the Learning SoundFlow playlist. It's a little bit more involved. You need to sort of read some text and create a comparison in a script. So I don't want to scare too many people away by going into that now.
It's actually it's a cool tutorial to start getting your head around doing some more heavy JavaScript coding, and the possibilities are endless once you get going.
Yeah, can you remember which one it is?
It's if else.
These
that
two
one
maybe, right?
Yes, those two. Yeah.
Yeah. So Kitsch walks through how to use click UI element as a way to get sort of the handle of the path to that UI element where you want to read state from. And then in the next video, you'll learn how to use that state, which can be true or false, to create an if-else statement in SoundFlow and then take 2 different actions based on that value. So it's really cool. I think I also want to throw in maybe just there's a really cool JavaScript tutorial series on YouTube that can teach you those things. For those of you who are a little bit more interested in that deep stuff, there's a link somewhere for that. Feel free to ask it in the chat, and we'll leave a link at some point. But yeah, let's move over to talking a little bit about surfaces. And
the link, if you want to know, it's the guy on YouTube. His name is Steve Griffith. And yes, I'll post the link up.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah.
Oh, I just want to say thanks, Frank, for joining us. Thanks for hosting me last time I was in LA. And yeah, thanks for all the support.
Awesome. Okay, that link's up. So let me see if I share my screen again. So head back over here. So you can create these great surfaces, these custom surfaces. This is just a mock-up one that I created here, but I'll take you through how to create one from scratch. You'll notice here we've got some faders, and then we've got some buttons that do different things. None of these are assigned at the moment. It's just a mock-up. But if we go back to the editor, here if I click the new button, I can say new surface. So after selecting the package where you want to put the surface, you click the plus button, click new surface. Let's just call it fader and button. Okay, so now that's going to open this page here where you can click show surface, open surface and edit surface. And clicking edit surface will take you into the surface editor. So the surface editor is where you can design exactly how you want things. So maybe you don't want to just use straight buttons that are from a deck. Maybe you want to use a combination of things. We've got different objects up here. So if I wanted to create a button to start with, if I click the button here, and then actually before I go into that, let's look at this panel on the right here. So if I've got the main desktop of the surface here, that's the main section, you can name the surface.
You accidentally created a button because you had that selected.
Oh, I did. Oops.
Yeah. So yeah, you can just select it there and hit delete.
Select it and delete it. Yep. So yeah, so if I have this selected here, you can set it so that the window, when you open the surface, so if I open the surface now, it creates this, and you can set it so it's always on top, or if it's floating, and you can also set the width and height. So say I wanted it 200 by 200, you could set it to that. Let's just go 600 by 400, like that. So say I wanted this to be resizable. You can choose this here to go auto zoom to fit, and that means you can change the size, and it will scale the different buttons and labels and whatever else you have on there. So a very important thing to select is the supported platforms. So if you want to be able to show it on your Mac screen, you click this one. And if you want to be able to show it on an iPad, this one, an iPhone, this one, and an Android, this one. So that will work on everything. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a button. So if we click the button up here, and then just click and drag, and that will create a button right there. So to label this button, you can go to the title property here and just call it, let me see, we'll call it grabber tool, because we, oh, maybe I deleted that before, but we can recreate it again very easily. Yeah. So that means you've got this button here, and to style it, you can, if you have it selected, you can change the radius of the border, so it has nice rounded corners. You can change the background color of the button by just moving this around, or choosing a color from here. So let's just make that purple. No, it's a bit glary. We'll make it blue. And then you can set it so that it has a tab at the bottom here by just changing that color. So say if I wanted to have that purple, like that. And then once you've got that created, you can use Command D to duplicate, and then it duplicates the button, and then you can just drag it on, and then Command D, and then enables you to make a bunch of different buttons. So the next thing we want to do is we want to be able to assign that to a command. So if we select the button, and then we scroll to the section where it says command, the property here. And if we click on that, just the same way as we choose things to choose scripts, macros, or whatever to put onto a deck, we do the same thing here. So I think there's actually an inbuilt command for the grabber tool. So let's try that. So that saved me. Okay, yeah. So yeah, there's a SoundFlow trigger, that command that is inbuilt, so we can select that. And now I'm just going to delete these for now, because I was just going to show you that just as an example. But if we now head over to Pro Tools, as you can see, it's going to continue to be floating. And if we change this from something else, if I click this now, it switches to the grabber tool, just like magic. So that's one great thing. And then we can also,
let me just jump in there.
Yeah.
So this actually, when I talked about earlier in my demo, when I added the, what was it called? Activate apps main window action to a macro. This is a really good example of where you might get an error with some built-in functions, and also with your own macros. Because if you go back to Pro Tools, Kitch, the moment that Kitch clicks on the button with his mouse on it, he's clicking on SoundFlow and making SoundFlow the focused app. So Pro Tools is no longer the focused app. And due to the way that macOS works with mouse clicks, the first mouse click in an unfocused app is treating differently from the first click in a focused app. So the first click sometimes just focuses that new app. It doesn't actually do what you thought it would by clicking. I think it's a good design choice, but it just means that it's a little bit annoying with your actions in macros sometimes. So I think most of you will be using surfaces on touch devices, and in that case, it's not a problem. But if you find yourself building a surface and you're testing it out like this on your Mac, and you're seeing an issue where you don't understand why it's not doing what it's supposed to do, there's a pretty good chance that it's because Pro Tools is not focused when the command is being run. And so if you want to debug that, you can just add a shortcut to that action or that command, like a keyboard shortcut, because then you can focus Pro Tools, see does it work when it's focused. If it does, then you know the issue was it wasn't focused. If it doesn't work there either, it's something else. But it's just good to have in mind as a troubleshooting step, because it can sort of, I think you can get to a point where you're like tearing your hair out and nothing's working.
Really good call.
Sorry for the.
Yeah. So if we head back over to the editor here, the Surface editor, we can also put in labels. So if I wanted to call this my surface, and then we can change the font size to say 30, and you can align the text and change all the properties you like there. And you can move these around easily. And you'll notice as I move them around, it actually updates it on the surface. So on the floating surface here, which is really handy if you're trying to make the design choices and say you want to move that down to here. Yeah, there we go. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a fader. So as an easy example, let me see. If I created a fader here, I can then label it, and that's going to show down here. So, like for instance, if it was to be volume, so if it was a volume or something like that, you could set that up. And if you wanted to change the CC value that the fader sends, you can scroll down to the MIDI section here, and we've got the custom MIDI output, which is 1, and the MIDI channel is 1. And so for the CC value, do you remember the CC value for volume?
I think 11 for expression is used, or 7
Yeah.
maybe. I think 7 is the.
I think so 7.
Yeah.
And so now when you use this, it's going to control the CC value of volume. And
if you
the
go
cool
back a
thing
little
is,
bit, sorry to jump in, just want to talk a little bit more about the advanced MIDI mapping options. If you select the fader again.
Yes, sure.
So I think this is new. Yeah, so you can see up here in the it has a start value and an end value. So the start value at 0 would be when the fader is all the way to the bottom, and 127 is all the way to the top. That's the normal thing you want a fader to do. But you could reverse these, or you could even change them to something entirely different if you want them to, if you need to control something that doesn't expect the full scale as input. For the track control property, it's set to relative, and that can also be set to jump. So relative means no matter where in the fader's full area where you press or touch with your finger, it's going to move relative to your movement. So you can click outside of the actual fader button, and you can still sort of drag the volume up and down. If you set it, yeah, can you show that actually on the Surface, Kitch?
Sure. Let me see
if you understand what I mean here. I think you can just. Oh yeah. So actually, and this works both on touch surfaces and on.
What did I call the surface?
On the screen. I think you can show this.
Fader and button.
Yeah.
Hang it, cancel.
Sorry for grabbing a hold of the talk. But I just think it's something, it's a new thing in 4.2, so I thought we should mention it.
Fader on button, there it is. Okay, so here, so I've got
Oh, yeah,
this.
I can't see that.
You can't see, hang on, let me just open. There we go. So as you can see here, I haven't set the background color. Let me just set the background color of this. This is the background of devices.
Yeah, that's a good point actually to mention. So for surfaces, there are two different background colors you can set. One for display on Mac and one for devices.
Yep.
And the reason is your surfaces when opened on the Mac are semi-transparent in the background, but on the device, there's nothing to be transparent against. So you have to set two different colors, or you have the ability to, at least.
I also wanted to show this. So if I have 3 faders open, and I can actually control these independent. So we've got multi-touch ability there. So we can have, expression dynamics and volume and panning and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah, and so the track control, it just means no matter where on each of the tracks that you touch, it will move that fader up and down. But if you set it to jump, it will jump to where you press your finger on the track of the fader. So it's sort of, yeah.
So for instance, say if I click, if you can see,
Exactly.
if I've got that all the way down and I click there,
yeah,
it's not going to jump to it. But if I select
but it will still allow you to move it relatively though when it's in relative mode.
But if I have it on jump, it will jump to the spot.
Exactly.
Like that. If you can see that.
Hmm?
Great.
Thanks. Yeah, and there's some other styling options there, but faders are super cool. And the XY pads are essentially just a sort of dual dimension or bidimensional fader. So it has 2 CC values that it sends, one for the X and one for the Y.
It's great. So, and then you've also got images. You can add images to the surface. And if actually you can add, let me see, make that larger. And if I drag that to there, and all that you have to do is you just enter in the URL of an image. So if I head over to here and just go new guitar, and then go images. Let me see if I can find an image. Open image, new tab. So if I copy that there, and then in the URL field here, if I put that in, and then there I've got my image. So you can change your buttons to display images and make your surface look nice and fancy.
Yeah. And by the way, if you want to set images on buttons, you should use that specific property, background URL.
Which is background URL right there.
So because if you put an image component on top of a button, you wouldn't be able to press the button, essentially.
There we go.
All right, that looks great. Yeah, so we haven't had any new questions in a while, but I just wanted to give everybody a heads up that you should definitely make sure to ask them now rather than later, so that we make sure to get to them. Now I'm just looking at your notes, Kitch, if there's anything we could move forward with. I mean,
totally. Well, while you're looking, I suggest if you want to get inspired of things to do with SoundFlow and different workflows, be sure to add the Facebook page, the SoundFlow Facebook page, and our Instagram. Lots of people are sharing stuff on Instagram of different workflows that they're using and different commands and stuff. So that's at SoundFlow app is the handle for Instagram, and Facebook /soundflow.org, I believe, is the Facebook page. And I think we're on Twitter as well, so you can find us there as well.
Yeah, and I want to really emphasize what you said about Instagram here. So I'm just sharing it so you can see it. it's so inspiring to look at all this stuff. There are so many people who are creating super cool surfaces with all these images, and I think a lot of them are using them as plugin loaders. Maybe that's something you can just briefly show the plugin loader you made in collaboration with Tizio.
Oh, yes,
With
yes,
that,
yes.
as well, you call that up. I just want to scroll through here. So this is Andrew Sheps's new app, the color deck, that essentially allows you to. It's like a breakout, color window or color palette for Pro Tools, and it has bidirectional sync, so it'll highlight here what you've selected in your timeline, and it also has some super advanced functionality for you can give labels to the colors. So if you always want your drums to be red, for example, you can rename that color to be drums, and it's going to be easier to manage if you have a lot of sessions. But just make sure to check this out. It really inspires me just to see what others are doing.
Excellent.
Okay,
let me show you the plugin loader. One sec. Oh, I can't share yet. There we go. Okay, now. Okay, so if I head back, if I head to the store,
thanks,
and
Chris. That's sweet. Sorry.
What's that?
Chris Argento says there are no questions because this product is so good.
Awesome. We love
I'm
it.
not crying.
Okay.
I'm just I have.
So if you write in Tizio, so Tizio, he's a producer, engineer, who's 3 times Grammy nominated and multi-platinum recording and mixing engineer. Great guy. And he contacted us. He had an idea for creating an awesome plugin loader. So we collaborated together to create this package. So I've got this installed at the moment, but if I didn't have it installed, all I'd have to do is click the install button here. And then once it's installed, then I click go to package, and that'll take you here, which you'll notice there's information on how to set everything up and how things labeled. And in here, you'll notice there's a deck here, which is just a sample deck of what can be set up. But Tizio wanted the ability to, with his Stream Deck and with an iPad for decks on surfaces, to be able to open his plugins super quickly. And he spent so much time, he said, diving into menus, that he just wanted to be able to, with these tight deadlines, because he mixes ludicrous amounts of tracks weekly. And so what we designed is this this plugin loader. And you'll notice here we've got Tizio's plugin loader, and then we've got a series of presets. So if you look in here, each of these presets has its own plugin name and plugin category, and all these different properties are set up. So essentially, you can go in and from the default preset, you can create your own presets if you have different plugins to what we have here, and you can add icons by pasting them up in this this icon section here. And let me just show you how it works. So if I click on the deck here, I can select make editable copy. And what that does is it duplicates the surface and puts the deck, and then puts that into one of my packages. So if I wanted to put this in my default package, I go make editable copy. And then from the drop down here, I'd choose default package, or just type it in and press OK. So now if I head to my default package and select the Tizio Stream Deck, I now have a copy that I can get up and working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show this on my screen here, just so you can see it. And if I just swap over to Pro Tools, and if I have a track selected here, say I wanted to put a Pro Q3 and then a Pro C, one after the other, all I do is just click the button here. It opens that up, and there's my my first plugin, and then I can put the Pro C in there, and it's super quick. So something that doesn't take too long to do, but it's so tedious if you have to go in here and then go, oh, what is it? And what is it? It's just so much quicker. And this will actually take into account the width of the track. So you don't have to choose whether it's mono or stereo. You can predefine that in the plugin settings. So in here. So for instance, this one here, you can go through and set it. So if you want it to be a multi-mono plugin, you can have that. If you want it to be mono to stereo, you can choose that. And for HDX systems, for native and DSP style plugins, you can choose those as well. And that'll work. So something like this is just, after creating this with Tezio, it's probably been the most used one that I've used for mixing tracks. It just makes things so simple and it keeps you in the creative flow, and it looks kind of cool as well.
How did you, because I think this is a question I've seen a lot that we haven't really covered in any official documentation yet, but how did you design these super cool icons?
Okay, so I used an external editor, and then I created the dimensions I think I created were a dimension that's divisible by 72 pixels. So a square 72 pixels by 72 pixels, because I looked up the Stream Decks like using 72 pixels by 72 pixels.
I think that's true for one of them, though.
What's that?
Only one of their types of devices has...
Only one of their types.
They're
exactly.
all different. Yeah, sorry. Yes. I was the one who had to code that integration. So.
Yes, I know, yeah. But yeah. That actually brings up a point that I really should point out. And that is that using Stream Decks, if any of you guys have Stream Decks out there, using the Stream Deck application, which is great for using other apps, whatever, but when it comes to using SoundFlow, Christian has developed integration directly into SoundFlow, so that SoundFlow controls the Stream Deck and makes it work, and it's less buggy and it works great. So if you click on the icon in the header, on the SoundFlow icon, then you can go to Set Up Stream Deck, and inside here there's a way to it'll come up with an option for you to use the SoundFlow option, the direct SoundFlow option, which I definitely suggest using when using SoundFlow.
Yeah,
there's a video. There's also a video on it.
For that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to click close or
close. There we go.
Thank you, JR, for the kind words, by the way. So the external app you're using, I cut you off before, but that you've been using Sketch, right? I think
Sketch. You can use
whatever you want.
Any different editor, and just export the images as PNG files. They seem to work the nicest. And as I said, I use divisions of 72. So double that if you want to use reuse those icons on a surface that you don't know what the size is going to be, just so that they look nice. But,
right. Do you want to show how you just the process, so we make sure everybody sees how you assign an icon to a command? And so maybe while you're setting that up, I just want to address that there are two ways you can add an icon to a Stream Deck button, or a deck button rather, in SoundFlow. One is to add it to the command itself before you add it to a button, or you can sort of override it on the button. The first method is the good one. So I think, Kitch, do you want to show those two ways?
So the first method was...
so there's, for example, in your example, in the Tezio's plugin loader,
yep,
for each of the presets there, you have actually, if you, I think, can you click there? I don't think so.
Yep.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, so you can see the selection here. So in these cases, each of these buttons are assigned to a command, and each of the commands themselves have icons. So that's why wherever you add that command to, it's just going to have that icon on the deck. So you don't have to set that icon twice. So exactly.
Yeah. So here we have like the Pro C the command right here, and I've assigned the icon up here. This is because it's in an internal package, you won't see this, but if you're creating your own packages, you'll be able to change this here by just clicking and pasting the image there. And so by having that set up that way means, for instance, if I went to this deck here and I clicked on this button here and say I wanted to put the Pro C thing here, I go add existing command and then write in Pro C and then press return, and you see it's populated by the image that's already there. But you can actually override that. So say, for instance, I had an image, and let me just, because also you can just take a screenshot. Say if I had this this image here. Actually, this is going to do strange things. Hang on a second. I've got my Dropbox set up so it sends things everywhere.
Oh,
but
no.
so let me see. No, that's actually not going to work. But you can actually replace the image by clicking here, and then you can paste in the image again, and that will override it.
Yeah, I think I just meant that the actual physical action you do when you add a new icon to a command, and by far that's the recommended approach. So don't go in this icon here, but rather set it to the commands, because as we just showed, that means wherever you put that command, it's going to have the right icon. And so
always set it here. That's the best practice.
And as you can see, you don't get to be able to pick a file. So if you have a PNG file in Finder that you designed in some software, you would just select that file in Finder and hit Command C, and then go in here and click to set the icon from clipboard.
Totally. A good thing to do as well is if you've got your apps open, if you like, say you had Pro Tools, let's find Pro Tools here. So if I had Pro Tools, if I go, if I Command I, and then I can select here and copy that, and then come back to here, and then just paste that in there, and the icon will show up there like that.
Awesome.
And then that means wherever I add this this command, or this macro to a deck, it's going to show up on the deck. So it's great. And you can always remove the icon by doing that. Yeah.
All right. Great stuff.
Excellent.
I think so we still have 13 people here. That's amazing. I can't believe you
awesome.
stuck out with us for so long. So I trust that that's because you're finding the information good. So I think, yeah, we'll start wrapping this up, unless there's some last minute questions. But I really hope that this has just helped you just a little bit to feel that it's approachable. That's the whole purpose of this. If things feel too complex, we know that they're way too complex, but we definitely want to.
And we're here for you.
Yeah, we just want to let you know that if you get over those first, the first hard learning curve, it's going to be cool. But yeah, I think we're going to try to replicate the success. And just try to make it a weekly or a bi-weekly event that Kitch will most likely be hosting. Maybe I'll come in as a guest star sometimes, something like that.
It's good having you here.
Yeah. Heiko, very inspiring. Thank you so much, Heiko. Really appreciate it. Yeah, so a massive thank you to all of you for joining in with your questions. We'll be posting the recorded version of this in the Facebook group a little bit later. And yeah, just have a great rest of your weekend. Thank you, Peter. And thanks Kitch, for joining in here.
Always my pleasure.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
See you in the forum, everyone.
Yeah.